One more verse. Let's do the first verse again. First verse again. Sweetheart of prayer, sweetheart of prayer, that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known in seasons of this and my soul has opened found relief and all escape the tempter's snare by thy return, sweetheart.
Thank you very much. We had some technical issues, but we are up and running, and we have Stephen Rathel joining with us. Stephen, are you where you can see us, and are you where you can hear us? I'm hoping that's a yes, because I didn't hear or see anything. And so
Yes.
you Stephen, was that you?
Yeah, I can see, I can hear you.
You can okay, great. Okay. There's been a lot of discussion, or there's been a certain amount of discussion in the news this past week. There's been some stuff going on between Donald Trump and the Pope. Pope said some things, Trump said some things. Without trying to rehash that whole discussion, the chapter that we're going to look at tonight does deal with politics just a little bit. Question: is there such a thing as a perfect candidate for a given political office? Why or why not? Gene's over here laughing. Joe's over here saying no. Megan says no way. All right, why not? Except for Megan's father-in-law. Okay. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Why is there no such thing as a perfect candidate? Because there's no perfect man. Years and years and years ago, when I was a kid, do any of y'all remember Louis Grizzard? A writer in Atlanta. He was talking about how, and this was right after Jimmy Carter is either right before or right after he got voted out of office. He said there is one perfect candidate. And if we were to elect him, he could save the government money because he's got the same initials of the guy who's leaving right now. He said the problem is nobody will ever elect someone like that. He was talking about Jesus Christ. And he had a lot of things to say about that. When you are deciding who to vote for local office, I'm not talking national office, I'm not talking president, I'm not talking Congress. When you are deciding who to vote for local office, whether it be city council, mayor, or whatever, what do you look for in a candidate?
I was a city councilman in Louisville. I never ran for it at first, but I always helped out in the community. I was always visible. I went to all the council meetings. I helped people as I could with my little business. And when someone died there, they asked me to run, to fill in their spot and then to run because I cared and it showed it.
All right. So you want someone who cares. Okay. Who else to add to that? And who works in the community. Okay. What else do you look for?
Find out as much as I can about their character, how they handle themselves around people, what they have done in the community.
Okay. Stephen, could you hear her answer? Stephen. No. Stephen, could you hear Betty Jo when she talked just then?
No.
No? Okay. Joe, can you go up and get another handheld? And do you know how to do all that stuff? I hope so. Okay. All right. What is something in a candidate, again, we're talking local office here, that would cause you to not vote for them. Don't have faith, okay? Someone who's not honest, okay, will cause you to not vote for them, okay? All right. Does anybody want to add to that? All right, we're looking at the part of 1 Samuel where we begin to see why certain things are done a certain way. Let me ask everyone to open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 13, beginning in verse 1. First Samuel chapter 13, beginning in verse 1. We're going to look through verse 7. First Samuel chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Saul was 40 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 32 years over Israel. Now Saul chose for himself 6,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000. If I could get you just station yourself in the back, and then when someone needs to speak back there, you can be there. Now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, while 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah of Benjamin. But he sent away the rest of the people, each to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard the news that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become odious to the Philistines. The people were then summoned to Saul at Gilgal. Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in an abundance. And they came up and camped at Michmash, east of Bethaven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were hard pressed, then the people hid themselves in caves and thickets and cliffs and cellars and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. But as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. All right. Verse 1, it talks about he served Israel as king, or he reigned 32 years over Israel. Why was it important to talk about this at the very beginning of his reign? He has just become king. Why is it so important to set this out right at the very beginning? Are you trying to figure out where did I lose you? No? Okay. Why is it so important to right at the very beginning? This is how long he reigned. What's the big deal with that? I'm sorry?
Just 2 years old.
No, he served more. He reigned for 32 years. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1. Saul was 40 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 32 years over Israel. Yours doesn't say that. That's the opposite. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a difference in the text here, but at any rate, this is at the beginning of his reign. We know he served for more than 2 years because you had the whole thing with David going on for a number of years. But at any rate, here he is, and we're going to look at some place names. This is the map of Israel. And what we're going to look at, you see the square, that's where we're going to kind of zero in just a little bit. You see that little star right there? Can you see that star? Steve, can you see the map from where you are?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay. That little star, that's where Gilgal is. All of this happened within that general vicinity. Michmash is just to the north of it. So all this is in the heart of Israel, not off to one side somewhere, but right here in the thick of things. All right, how does this conflict start? You've got a conflict here. How does it start? What triggers it? Who triggers it? I'm looking at verses 1 and 2. Actually, I'm looking at verse 3. All right.
Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan kicks this thing off. Jonathan goes after Oh, hey, Pam. Good to have you tonight.
Thank you.
All right. What is missing from this? Jonathan kind of picks a fight with them. What's missing from all this? Here they're going at it hammer and nail. What's missing from that? What should they have done before they picked a fight with the Philistines?
Talk to Samuel.
All right, talk to Samuel, talk to God. Okay. You know, what's missing is they should have said, okay, Lord, do we go after him or do we let him come to us? Or are you going to handle this in some other way? Jonathan, crown prince at that point in time, decides to take matters in his own hand. How does Saul respond to what Jonathan does? Well, he didn't take the credit, I don't think necessarily, but he did do something. He blew the trumpet, and what's that's a way of signaling? It's an announcing. All right, when you blow the trumpet, what that is, that's a way of summoning everybody. Now, once upon a time, you would hear, like in the army, you would hear bugle calls. First call, reveille. Later on, you have tattoo, taps. Did they do that in the Air Force Base when you were on? Yeah, every afternoon where Mary Joyce is at 5 o'clock, you hear that bugle go off and it's retreat. And wherever you are on that campus, you stop what you're doing. If you're outside, you stop what you're doing, you face the flag, you salute it, you know, and then they lower the flag and they fire the cannon. That's something they do every single day that campus is open. The only time they don't do is when it's closed because of like a holiday or like a blizzard, which they had happened earlier this year. And so Saul decides, all right, let's gather everybody together. Notice that even Saul doesn't say, hey, Samuel, what's our next step? Lord, what's our next step? He does not send out any group of emissaries to the Philistines and say, hey, let's see if we can't peacefully resolve this thing. He starts gathering together for a fight. What do you make of this army that the Philistines mustered? Larger than what the Israel had, pretty potent mustering.
It's different than what you said. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 30,000 chariots.
Yes.
Mine says 3,000.
All right, yeah. Translating numbers from Hebrew to English is more art than science. There's a lot of context issues, but at any rate,
It's just like you were saying.
yeah, what do you make of the size of this army? Big. For that day and time, this is a huge army. Well, I wouldn't say it was impossible. I mean, they wide open fields. Yeah. With horses. Yeah, they had ways of doing that. And so, you know, here you've got this massive army the Philistines have mustered. Did the Israelites have reason to run and hide? Because that's what they did. They scooted. All right. For those of you who can't see it at home, that heads are nodding over here when I say that. You know, look at the description of this thing, and you know they're skedaddling on this thing. When the men of Israel saw they were in a strait, for the people were hard pressed, the people hid themselves in caves and thickets and cliffs and cellars and pits, wherever they could go to. All right, now Saul gathers everybody together, and he gets a pretty good response. What does it say about Saul? That he appears to have the support of the majority of the Hebrew people at this point. What does that say about him? That he's a trusted leader, okay? He called them together and everybody responded. And they came out even knowing that the Philistines were going to be tough to beat because there's a lot of them. Look at verse 7. Look at verse 7. What was their attitude in verse 7? What was the people's? They're scared. My translation is they were trembling. Does anybody have a different word than that? Yeah. Translating Hebrew to English is, again, there's like sometimes there's 3 or 4 words that'll technically be correct. They were gripped with fear. Okay. Do you think they had reason to be gripped with fear? Yeah. Yeah. If you've got a small army and they've got a large army, and here's the thing about chariots. It's hard to understand today the significance of a chariot because it's so far removed from what we ordinarily see on the battlefield. Ordinarily now on the battlefield, we see, soldiers with rifles and okay. All right. Thank you, Kevin. That's all right. That's all right. All right. So, all right, where was I? Yeah, verse 7. They're gripped with fear. Yeah, all right. The chariots, you would have yourself 1, 2, 4 horses, maybe depending on the setup. You got one person driving it. Usually you got another person with maybe a bow and arrow, maybe spears, maybe a sword, and they could run infantry down. Oftentimes the wheels had spikes on them. Oftentimes there'd be another spike jutting out. And imagine being just simply next to that thing when that thing runs through. It had a chariot had the impact then that a tank has, today on the modern battlefield. It could just run everything over. And so not only are they outnumbered, they are outgunned big time. And you're asking these guys, got to remember, Israel did not have a standing professional army at this point, or if they did, it was very, very small, very young, very early in its existence. And so you're asking these young kids out there, 18, 19, 20 years old, to go take up whatever weapon they can grab and go out and face these chariots. You think they might have been a little bit nervous about doing so? Yeah, I would say probably so. Okay. Moving on to chapter verse 8 through 14. Now he waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, bring to me the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. As it came about, as soon as they finished offering the burnt offering, that behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and to greet him. But Samuel said, what have you done? And Saul said, because I saw that the people were scattering from me, and you did not come within the appointed days, and the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, therefore I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not asked the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, you have acted foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom shall not endure. The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. Okay, so they gather the troops together, and they wait 7 days. Can you imagine what it was like for those individual soldiers for that 7 days? Can you imagine what it was like? Anyone want to take a guess at what might have been going through their heads? 7
Kind of like waiting on surgery.
Waiting on surgery. Okay, someone once said that.
Let's get it on.
I'm sorry.
Let's get it on.
Let's get it on. You know, someone once said about going into combat, it's like 6 hours of sheer boredom followed by 15 minutes of sheer terror. You just wait, you wait, and then all of a sudden, boom, except these aren't waiting 6 hours. These are waiting an entire week. Not only that, but look at the numbers. How much did he start with? A few thousand. How many's he got right now?
1,000.
About 600 or so.
Yep.
As I'm reading here. No matter how you interpret those numbers, and again, translating numbers from Hebrew to English it depends on the context so much. There's no doubt that he has lost a lot of people. What do you think those 7 days were like for Saul? Now remember, he's waiting on Samuel. Samuel's supposed to come. They've agreed. Samuel's going to show up at a certain time, and they're going to offer sacrifices and out God's face. He's going to tell them what to do. Saul is waiting on Samuel. 7 days. Samuel hadn't shown up.
Probably very angry.
Probably very anxious. I would say probably so. What was Saul thinking when he made the decision to make the offering himself? What was going through his head? Speak into the microphone, please.
reluctantly.
You think he was reluctant?
He had to force himself.
Had to force himself. I love these excuses these people give. You know who that reminds me of? It reminds me of back at the beginning of the Exodus when Moses was up on the mountaintop receiving the law. The people were down. They waited and waited and waited. He didn't show up. And so they got Aaron to make themselves a golden calf. And when Moses came down, confronted, remember what Aaron said? You know, this golden calf just jumped out of the fire. Right. I'm a little skeptical about his excuse here. You know, I had to force myself to. He got anxious and he got impatient. Not only that, but he views this sacrifice as a key to the battle, which it is, but not necessarily in the way that he thinks it is. He thinks, okay, I'll offer the sacrifice, God's going to give us the victory. That ain't the way this works. This is, we're going to offer the sacrifice, and then we're going to do what God tells us to do. And God has said here that, okay, I speak through Samuel. Samuel ain't there. He can offer all the sacrifices you want. That's not going to change the fact that this is not the way God works. Not only that, why was Saul offering the sacrifice a problem in any event? He was not a priest. All right. The job of the priest was to offer the sacrifices. The job of the king was to rule, settle disputes, and that sort of thing. Let me ask you this. Is it possible that Samuel's tardiness might have been intentional? Think it might have been intentional, maybe. I've seen a few people nod their heads over here. I see some doubt over there. I just can't help but wondering. It doesn't say this, but I can't help but wondering if God told Samuel, slow down. Slow down. Let's put Saul in a stressful situation and let's watch and see how he reacts to it. And I think God knew from the very beginning what was going to happen, but I don't think it was enough for God to know. I think Samuel had to see it, and I think everybody else had to see it. Because lo and behold, just as soon as Saul gets done doing the sacrifice, look who shows up over the hill. Samuel. Samuel comes up, what have you done? Well, I had to force myself to do this. All right. Why do you think God had a priestly tribe to begin with? Did you ever notice that when you look on the maps of all the tribes and all their plots of land, did you ever notice that Levi didn't get a piece of land? Yeah. All the tribes except for Levi had their own piece of land, not the Levites. They're supposed to be there with the tabernacle. They're supposed to live within the others. In that day and time, land brought money, money brought power. The Levites were already the priestly tribe. They didn't need to have any more power than what they already had. Can you imagine what would happen if the Levites did have some land and they grew not only the priestly end of things, but they also became politically powerful? Do you see the potential problem there? Problems for abuse of power? Let me tell you something. This has been some 3,000 years since this took place. Human nature really hasn't changed a whole lot. It really, really hasn't. You know, there is so much danger to one person having both the religious power and the political power. Let me ask you this. What if Samuel had not shown up that day at all? Would Saul still have been wrong for doing the sacrifice? Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. What do you make of Samuel's reaction to this? He's upset, but he does more than just simply express his displeasure. What does he tell Saul's going to happen?
He says, now the Philistines will come down against me in Gilgal.
Yeah, he says the Philistines are going to come down against him, but also look at what Samuel says is going to happen to Saul. Look at verse 14. Check out verse 14.
It says the kingdom shall
He's
not
about-
endure.
I'm sorry, Pam.
It says the kingdom shall not endure. The
Right.
Lord has set
His
up a man.
Yeah, his kingship will not endure. Samuel's telling him, God's telling him through Samuel, he's saying, look, I was going to make you, your family, the reigning king over Israel for all time. But that's not going to happen now. God is now looking for someone else that's after his own heart. A little bit of foreshadowing here, maybe. You know, obviously, who's Samuel talking about? David. All right. Hadn't gotten to that part of the story yet, but here we are. Saul has just become king. He's only been king a little while, maybe a year or two. And this is his first real test. And he fails it miserably. Absolutely fails it miserably. And so, all right, so Samuel comes in and pronounces his judgment. Then picking up in verse 15. Then Samuel rose and went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin, and saw the number of the people who were present with him, about 600. See how his numbers have collapsed? See how his numbers have collapsed? Now Saul and his son Jonathan and the people who were present with him were staying in Gibeah of Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. And the raiders came from the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned toward Ophrah to the land of Shual. One company turns towards Beth Horon, and another company toward the border, which overlooks the valley of Zeboim, Zeboim toward the wilderness. And I'm just going to finish this section out. Now, no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, his hoe. And the charge was 2/3 of a shekel for plowshares, and the mattocks, the forks, the axes, and to fix the hoes. So it came about on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and his son Jonathan. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. All right. 600 soldiers. How's that stack up against the Philistines? People are laughing. Okay. Not so good. You're talking about a couple of companies, while this guy's got several battalions, maybe even a couple of brigades, depending on how you look at the numbers. What strategy is the Philistines seem to be employing against Israel? What are troop movements doing? Notice how they split the troops up and they send them in 3 different directions. All right. Saul's got a problem here. He can't stop all 3 branches of this thing. He may not be able to stop any of them. I mean, if they break him down into thirds, there's still more than what he's got. And so he either tries to break his company up into to take them on each one at a time, in which case he's probably going to lose everything, or he stands his ground, he's still going to lose everything. And so they've already got large army. They're breaking up into 3 parts, headed in 3 different directions. What else do they seem to be doing that prevents the Israelites from becoming a threat? What else are they doing there?
Well, they prevented it from getting any more weapons with the
Yeah.
blacksmith not being found.
Yeah, they hire all the blacksmiths.
Yeah.
They hire all the blacksmiths. And so you've got one of the things about the Philistines that becomes a little bit more evident. The Philistines already are a pretty solid force because they were using iron weapons when everyone else was using bronze weapons. And the advantage of iron, they hadn't gotten to steel yet, but they did have iron. The advantage is that if I've got myself a suit of armor, and it's made out of bronze, and I've got myself a bronze helmet, bronze shield, bronze sword, and Bob's got himself a suit of armor made out of iron, who do you think is going to win?
The suit
Bob.
of iron.
Yeah, Bob, the suit of iron, it's stronger. It can hold an edge so much more effectively. It's much more difficult to break. Maybe a little bit heavier, but if I'm going into battle, I want iron implements, not brass or bronze or something like that. All right. So if you're a soldier in the Israelite army, what do you think your chances are?
Not real good.
And again, more laughter.
Yeah, not very good.
Yeah, not very good. And the thing is, look at their description of the weapons. They're using farming implements,
Yeah.
an axe, a hammer, a
Forks.
fork. Yeah, hooks, a fork. Meanwhile, the Philistines using swords and spears. The thing is, if you go back and look at the weaponry that you see at this time, I was watching someone where someone was explaining this. If you look at all the implements of war from that day and time, all of them had their off-field uses, their civilian uses, except for the sword. The axe, the hammer, the bow, the spear. You could use the knife. You could use those for hunting. You could use those for farming. You could use those for construction. But if you've got a sword, that is built for one reason and one reason only, and that's to hurt somebody or kill somebody. The Philistines, these guys were warriors. They had weapons that were the best that could be found, using the best materials, stronger than anything the Israelites had. And they outnumber them big time. All right. So if the Israelite army is going to win this thing, how are they going to do it?
With a God, praying to God.
This is going to have to be a God thing. And that's kind of what we're moving towards. Here we have Saul, King Saul. The people went to Samuel and said, we want a king. This whole business of judges, it ain't working for us anymore. It just isn't. You're doing a pretty good job. Eli did a pretty good job, but his sons weren't much. Your sons aren't much. No offense, but they aren't. So we want a king. We want to be like other people. The problem was the Israelites were never supposed to be like other people. They were supposed to be something different. God said, but if you want a king, all right, I'll give you a king. And he found a king that was exactly what the people wanted. Saul. The problem is that while he may have been what they wanted, he wasn't necessarily what they needed. Saul was a flawed man. Saul had a character flaw. Everybody has character flaws. Some of them are more serious than others, but everybody has them. Funny thing about character flaws, they tend to be passed down from generation to generation. A friend of mine once said, when the parents sin, the children are either repulsed by what they see or they repeat what they see, or both. A young man that witnesses his father committing adultery and is not repulsed by what he sees is a good candidate to become a philanderer himself. I remember one time reading a book about marriages, and they said, and he was talking to the women, he says, if you want to know if the guy that you're considering getting married to, if you want to know if he's likely to be a faithful husband, look at home. Not your home where you're with him. Look at the home he grew up in. If his father was faithful to his mother, chances are he's going to be faithful to you. If his father was not, you need to have a conversation. I'm not saying you're doomed to repeat the sins of your parents, but there is a pattern that can be established there unless a deliberate effort is made to break it. This is why Saul's choice to perform the sacrifices himself was such a big deal. This was not some isolated incident that could be atoned for and forgiven. This reflected an attitude that he would almost certainly pass on to the next generation, whether it be Jonathan or one of his other sons. And we already see evidence of that right here, where Jonathan's the one that picks this fight without going to Saul, without going to Samuel, without going to God and saying, hey, is this what you want me to do? This is what I'm thinking, but is this of you or is this, of something else? You already see Jonathan, as good a guy as he was, as we're going to see, he inherited some of those same tendencies from his father. The precedent had been set, and Samuel and God both realized this would have a ripple effect that went way beyond Saul. This could, if left unchecked, have a cancerous effect on the nation of Israel. What if Saul had been allowed to get away with this? And the people said, oh, you don't have to be a priest in order to offer a sacrifice. I mean, after all, we're all the family of God, aren't we? We're all part of the people of God. Well, yeah, you are, but there are different jobs within this thing. Not only would this have blurred the lines between king and priest, it would set the stage for a future heir of Saul to claim to be both, giving one person way too much power. History is replete of examples of religious leaders having political power as well. Think of the popes of the late medieval and Renaissance period having earthly authority in the form of troops and property, as well as the authority to excommunicate any king or queen that displeased them. set the stage for unspeakable corruption. This is one reason why the founding fathers of the U.S. believed in separation of church and state. I remember one time someone asked me, can you give me an example in the Bible of separation of church and state? And this was the passage that I pointed them to. You had Saul, the political power, the earthly power, Samuel, the religious aspect of this. The intention was to keep them separate. Saul demonstrated right here in his very first crisis that while he was the kind of king that Israel wanted, he was not the kind of king that Israel needed. When it came right down to brass tacks, as my dad used to say, Saul saw God as being someone or something that could be manipulated. I'm going to offer these sacrifices and then he's going to come through for us. Doesn't quite work like that. And he didn't really trust that God would come through for him in time. When it looked like he was a little bit late, every time I think about this, I think about, did any of y'all ever see, this is going to sound strange to bring up in a church, but did any of y'all ever see Fellowship of the Ring, the first of Lord of the
Yeah.
Ring? Some of us
I did.
saw it. Oh yeah, Megan's back there waving her hands pretty good. There was that scene at the very beginning of the movie when Gandalf the wizard shows up and Frodo is out there to meet him. And when Frodo sees him, says, "You're late." Megan, do you remember how he replied? A wizard is never late. He always arrives precisely when he intends to. God is never late. God always arrives precisely when he intends to. Saul, at the end of the day, didn't trust him. Two things I want to catch for this. Number one, we saw what kind of legacy Saul was getting ready to leave for his children, for Jonathan and for the rest of them. What kind of legacy are you leaving for the next generation, not only in your family, but also in this church? What kind of legacy are you leaving the next generation in this church? Number two, when push comes to shove, how much do you really trust God to see you through something, even when it appears, that he might be running just a little bit late? Because God always arrives precisely on time, exactly when he intends to. It's such a shame because Saul, I think, had the potential to be a pretty decent king, but he was flawed. At the end of the day, he saw himself as being the center of power. I'm going to manipulate God. I'm going to manipulate Samuel. I'm going to tell him when he's supposed to be here, and I'm going to decide what course of action we're going to take. This would plague him throughout his entire reign. Next week, we're going to see how they deal with all these thousands and thousands of Philistines. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to hear your voice, to dive into your word. Lord, help us to trust in you even when it seems that you're not moving on the time frame that we expect or the time frame that we desire. Lord, help us to trust that even when things look too late, Father, you're still always there. Lord, help us to remember the legacy that we should leave behind the next generation of believers. We love you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right,
Amen.
Megan, can you zoom down here on the crowd just a little bit? Everyone turn around, look at the camera right above Megan's head and wave at the people online. All right. Yeah. All right. Now, next week is going to be a little bit different. Number one, we're having the fellowship meal followed by a business meeting. And Scott and Evelyn, y'all are absolutely invited to come to that. And so we'll have the fellowship meal, have a business meeting. They'll start after we're done eating, which is usually about 6:45. The following week, we're going to be back in here. But starting that week, we are not going to be live streaming over Facebook and YouTube. It's either going to be in person or it's going to be over Zoom. We'll still send out the link. All you got to do is click on it and it'll bring you right to it. But we're trying to get more interaction and we're trying to make this more effective for the whole thing. And so does all that make sense to you? Okay. If you have any trouble, trying to get Zoom loaded on your computer, let me know. I'll come to your house and I'll help you get it set up. I do know a little bit about computers here and there. You might have to feed me. Yes. When I was in seminary, I charged people to fix their computers. I charged them ice cream sundaes from Baskin Robbins. I'm not making that up. I actually did.
Funny.
All right. Stephen, Pam, good to have you guys on tonight.
Thanks.
And I will
Thanks.